My back was pressed against the cold marble wall, and I couldn't breathe. Through the crack in the door, I could see him, James Richardson, the billionaire who owned everything, including my future, leaning back in his leather chair with a glass of bourbon in his hand and not a trace of shame on his face. 2,000 employees, he said, and he was smiling. The announcement goes out Friday morning. Security escorts them out by noon. We save $40 million annually. Stock jumps, and by next quarter, nobody even remembers their names. It was Wednesday night, November 16th, 11:17 p.m. I had less than 40 hours to stop him. My name is Marcus Webb, and that night I was 52 years old, invisible, and more terrified than I'd ever been in my life. I'm a janitor at Richardson Industries, have been for 17 years, ever since I lost everything in the 2008 crash, and this was the only job that didn't ask questions about the gap in my resume or why my hands shook during the interview. For 17 years, I've cleaned up after people who don't see me. I empty their trash, scrub their toilets, mop their floors while they're safe at home with their families. I know things about them they think nobody knows. Which executive is cheating on his wife? Which VP is popping pills to get through board meetings? Which manager cries in the bathroom every Thursday afternoon? But they don't know a damn thing about me. I'm furniture, a ghost, the guy in the blue uniform who nods and smiles and disappears. That night, I was supposed to clean Richardson's office at 10:30, but my cart had a busted wheel, the same wheel I'd put in 3 maintenance requests for, and I was running late, muttering under my breath about cheap equipment and cheaper bosses when I heard his voice through the door. I should have knocked. I should have walked away, but there was something in his tone, that casual cruelty rich men use when they think no one's listening, that made me freeze. I pressed myself against that wall, my heart slamming so hard against my ribs I thought it would give me away. The hallway was freezing. The heating system always shut off at 11 p.m. to save money. My breath came out in small clouds, and my hands, my old, cracked janitor's hands, were shaking so badly I had to grip my mop to steady them. 2,000 people, he said again, like he was ordering office supplies. 2,000 families. Gone. My daughter's face flashed in my mind. Emma. She doesn't talk to me anymore. Hasn't in 7 years, not since her mother died, and she blamed me for working too much, for not being there, for choosing survival over presence. But I remembered what it felt like to lose everything overnight. I remembered the shame, the fear, the rage at men in expensive suits who decided your life wasn't worth the line item on their budget. I knew these people Richardson was about to destroy. Sandra Martinez on the 3rd floor, who left me cookies every Christmas because she said nobody should be alone on the holidays. She was 61, 3 years from retirement. Jamal Foster in accounting, who'd shown me pictures of his newborn daughter every single night for 2 weeks straight, his eyes wet with joy. He'd just bought a house. Teresa Chen in HR, who was putting 3 kids through college on her salary and kept a photo of them on her desk with a sticky note that said, "This is why we fight." These weren't numbers. They were my people, the only family I had left. But what could I do? I was nobody. A janitor with bad knees, a GED, and a 17-year-old uniform that still had someone else's name tag sewn inside because they'd given me a dead man's clothes on my first day. Who would listen to me? I stood in that hallway, and I'm not proud of what I thought next. I thought about walking away. I thought about keeping my head down, staying invisible, surviving. They'd fire those 2,000 people, and I'd still have my job. Because nobody fires the janitor, we're too cheap to matter. I could have walked away, and for about 10 seconds, I was going to. Then I heard Richardson laugh, this low, satisfied sound, and say, "Make sure the severance packages are insulting. I want them to know they're disposable." Something broke inside me. I turned back toward his door, and that's when I saw it. Through the gap, on the corner of his massive oak desk, half hidden under a pile of folders, his laptop, open, unlocked, glowing. And I realized something that changed everything. Being invisible isn't weakness, it's power. Because when no one sees you, they never see you coming. What I did next could have cost me everything. My job, my freedom, maybe even my life. But I'd already lost everything that mattered once before. I wasn't going to stand by and watch it happen to 2,000 other people just because I was afraid. So I made a choice. And that choice set off a chain of events that would expose corruption at the highest levels, turn me into a fugitive, and put every single person I cared about in danger. But it also saved them all. This is my story. This is how an invisible man went to war with a billionaire and won. If you want to know what I did that night, if you want to know how a janitor with nothing to lose became the most dangerous man James Richardson ever met, stay with me. Hit that like button, subscribe, because what happened next, nobody saw coming. Not Richardson, not his lawyers, not the FBI. Nobody. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been invisible? Have you ever had to choose between your safety and doing what's right? I did, and I'm about to show you exactly what that cost me. Let's do this together. I've spent 17 years perfecting the art of not existing. You'd think that would make you safe, being nobody, being the guy who empties trash bins at midnight while the real people sleep in their real beds with their real families. But invisibility is a double-edged blade, and that Wednesday night in November, I learned exactly how sharp both edges could cut. My hands were still shaking when I finally moved away from Richardson's door. The hallway stretched out before me like a throat waiting to swallow me whole, fluorescent lights humming their indifferent song overhead. I could still hear his voice in my head, that casual cruelty, that laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Make sure the severance packages are insulting. Jesus Christ, 2,000 people, and he wanted them humiliated on their way out. I pushed my cart toward the service elevator, the busted wheels squeaking with every rotation, a sound I'd complained about for months that nobody fixed because nobody cared. That's the thing about being invisible. They don't maintain your equipment. They don't learn your name. They sure as hell don't imagine you might be listening when they plan their corporate massacres. The elevator doors closed, and I saw my reflection in the scratched metal. 52 years old. Gray stubble I couldn't afford the time to shave properly. Uniform that hung loose because I'd lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. Eyes that had seen too much and said too little for too damn long. I thought about Emma. God, I thought about Emma. 7 years of silence between us. 7 years since she screamed at me in the hospital after her mother died. You were never there. You were always working. You chose this job over us. She wasn't wrong. I had chosen survival over presence. But what she didn't understand, what nobody who hasn't lost everything understands, is that sometimes survival is all you have left to choose. The elevator descended into the basement where we kept our cleaning supplies, our time cards, our locker room that smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. My coworker Raphael was there, eating cold pizza from the vending machine, half asleep after pulling a double shift. "Yo, Marcus," he mumbled, "you look like you seen a ghost." I almost laughed. I was the ghost. We all were. But I'd just seen something else entirely. I'd seen the future. 2,000 families destroyed. And for the first time in 17 years, I had information that mattered. Information that could change everything or destroy me completely. "Yeah," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "Something like that." I opened my locker. Inside, taped to the door, was a photo from 12 years ago. Emma's high school graduation. She was smiling, her arm around my shoulder, before everything fell apart, before the economy crashed, before her mother got sick, before I became this hollow thing in a blue uniform. Richardson's laptop was still up there, open, unlocked, glowing with secrets. and I had less than 40 hours to decide if I was going to stay a ghost or become something else entirely. Something dangerous. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Sandra, Jamal, Teresa. 2,000 names I'd never know, attached to families I'd never meet, all standing on the edge of a cliff they didn't even know was there. My apartment was a studio in the worst part of town, the kind of place where gunshots are just background noise, and the landlord hasn't fixed anything since Reagan was president. I sat on my second-hand couch, still wearing my uniform, staring at the wall like it might give me answers it didn't have. The thing about being poor isn't just the empty wallet, it's the empty options. It's knowing that one wrong move, one missed paycheck, one angry boss, and you're on the street. You live in a permanent state of almost disaster, always one crisis away from losing everything you've managed to scrape together. I knew what Friday morning would look like for those 2,000 people. I'd lived it myself in 2008. You walk into work thinking it's just another day. Maybe you stopped for coffee. Maybe you kissed your kid goodbye. Maybe you were thinking about what to make for dinner or whether you could afford to fix the car this month. Then security meets you at the door. They hand you a box. They watch you pack your personal items like you're a criminal. They escort you out in front of everyone, and you can feel their eyes on you. Some pitying, some relieved it wasn't them, all thinking the same thing. Thank God it's not me. Yet. The humiliation is worse than the fear. The shame burrows into your bones and makes a home there. You go home and you have to tell your spouse, your kids, your parents. You have to watch their faces change when they realize daddy isn't invincible. Mommy can't protect them from the world. The adults don't actually have it figured out. I pulled out my phone. 3:47 a.m. I opened Facebook, something I barely used, and searched for Jamal Foster. There he was, his profile picture showing him holding that tiny baby girl, both of them grinning like they'd won the lottery. His latest post was from yesterday. Blessed beyond measure. First house keys in hand. My daughter will grow up with a yard. Dreams do come true. I felt sick. I searched for Sandra Martinez next. Her page was private, but her profile picture showed her at what looked like a family reunion, surrounded by grandchildren. I counted at least 6 kids climbing on her like she was playground equipment. Teresa Chen. Her cover photo was her 3 kids on college graduation day, all wearing caps and gowns, all looking at her like she'd hung the moon, which, honestly, she probably had. I'd heard her on the phone once, arguing with the financial aid office, her voice steel and desperation mixed together. My children will have better than I did. They will have choices, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. The words echoed in my head. I looked at my hands, calloused, scarred from years of industrial cleaners and hard floors. These weren't the hands of a hero. These were the hands of a man who'd given up a long time ago. But maybe that was exactly why I could do what needed doing. When you've already lost everything, you've got nothing left to fear. Except I was lying to myself. I had plenty to fear. I could lose this job. I could go to jail. I could end up homeless, sick, alone. I could make everything worse and save nobody. But then I thought about Jamal's baby girl, about Sandra's grandchildren, about Teresa's kids and their hard-won diplomas. I thought about Emma and how she'd said I chose wrong. Maybe I could choose different this time. Maybe it wasn't too late to be someone she wouldn't be ashamed of. Or maybe I was just a 52-year-old janitor having a breakdown. Thursday morning came with rain, the kind of cold, relentless November rain that seeps into your bones and stays there. I clocked in at 6 a.m. for my day shift, something I only did twice a week to supplement the night work. My supervisor, Gary, barely looked up from his coffee. "Marcus, you look like hell. Didn't sleep. Well, wake up. Executive floor needs deep cleaning today, some big meeting tomorrow." He said it casual, like he didn't know. like we were all just pieces on a board, moving where we were told. But Gary didn't know about Friday. None of them knew. Just Richardson and his inner circle, planning their execution in secret. I took the elevator up, my heart hammering. I'd made a decision sometime around 5 a.m. in that gray space between giving up and doubling down. I was going back to Richardson's office. I was going to get access to that laptop. And I was going to find evidence, something concrete I could leak to the press, to the workers, to someone who could stop this. It was insane. It was criminal. It was absolutely going to destroy me. But I was going to do it anyway. The executive floor was mostly empty this early. A few junior associates rushing around with coffee, trying to look important. Richardson's office door was closed, but I had keys to every room in the building. That's the thing about being a janitor. You have access to everything, and nobody thinks twice about it. I knocked first. Professional. Normal. No answer. My hand shook as I turned the key. The office was obscene in its luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Leather furniture that probably cost more than I made in a year. His desk was the size of my entire apartment. And there, exactly where I'd seen it last night, was the laptop. I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably 30 seconds. This was it. The point of no return. If I touched that computer, I was committing a felony. If I got caught, I'd go to prison. At 52, with my health, I might not come out. But if I walked away, 2,000 people would lose everything. I thought about my daughter, about the man I used to be before the world beat him down, about whether it's ever too late to become someone worth remembering. I crossed the room. My hands, those scarred janitor hands, opened the laptop. It was still logged into his email. Jesus Christ, the arrogance. He didn't even lock his screen, because who would dare? Me, that's who. I pulled out my phone, my ancient cracked screen phone that I'd been meaning to replace for 3 years. I started taking pictures, emails, spreadsheets, documents labeled Restructuring Plan Confidential. My hands were steadier now. Funny how breaking the law can calm you down once you commit. That's when I heard the voice behind me. Well, what do we have here? I turned around and my blood turned to ice. It wasn't Richardson. It was worse. It was David Chen, VP of Security, Teresa's younger brother, a guy I'd watched grow up through her proud stories. And the look on his face said everything about how badly I'd just screwed up. Marcus, he said quietly, and there was something like sorrow in his voice. What the hell are you doing? If you discovered someone you knew, someone good, breaking the law to save thousands of people, would you turn them in? Or would you look the other way? Drop your answer in the comments. Because David Chen had to make that choice in about 5 seconds. David Chen closed the door behind him. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the silence. My sister, he said, and his voice cracked. You're doing this because of my sister. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The phone in my hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. On the screen, Richardson's email was still visible. Termination list, final version. David crossed the room slowly, like he was approaching a wounded animal. He was 34, fit, wore a suit that actually fit him, had a wedding ring and a college degree and a future that hadn't been stolen by economic collapse. Everything I used to have. Everything his sister had worked herself half to death to give him. How long have you known? He asked. Since last night. I heard Richardson planning it. My voice came out rough. Friday morning, 2,000 people. Your sister's one of them. His face went gray. He reached for the desk to steady himself, and for a moment I saw past the security badge and the authority. I saw Teresa's little brother, the kid she'd raised after their parents died, the one she'd sacrificed everything for. Teresa, he whispered. Jesus Christ, Teresa. We stood there, 2 men who loved the same woman. Him as family, me as the only friend I had left. both realizing we were standing in the wreckage of something that hadn't exploded yet. "You should arrest me," I said. "It's your job. I broke in. I was stealing confidential information. You should call the police right now." He looked at me for a long time. "Yeah, I should." But he didn't move. Neither did I. "She's 56 years old," David said finally. "She has diabetes. Her insulin costs $400 a month, even with insurance. She's got 1 kid still in college, 2 more with student loans she's helping them pay. If she loses this job, she loses her health insurance. If she loses her health insurance—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. "I know," I said. "Do you?" His voice got hard. "Do you really know what you're asking me to do? You're asking me to let a janitor commit corporate espionage. You're asking me to risk my career, my freedom, maybe my family's security. For what? So you can play hero?" The words hit like fists, and they weren't wrong, but they weren't all right either. "I'm not playing anything," I said. "I'm a 52-year-old man with nothing left but this. My wife is dead. My daughter won't speak to me. I lost my real career in the crash and spent 17 years cleaning up after people who don't know my name. I have nothing, David, literally nothing. But I have this information, and I have less than a day to do something with it. And if I do nothing, I have to live with watching 2,000 people, including your sister, get destroyed. So no, I'm not playing hero. I'm just trying not to be a coward." My voice broke on the last word. I hadn't meant to say that much, hadn't meant to expose myself like that. But there it was, the ugly truth. I was doing this as much for me as for them. David was quiet for a long time. Outside, the rain picked up, hammering against the windows like it was trying to get in. "Show me," he said finally. "What?" "Show me what you found. If I'm going to let you walk out of here, I need to know it's worth it." I turned the laptop toward him, pulled up the termination list. 2,043 names, to be precise, arranged alphabetically. I scrolled down to the C's. Chen, Teresa M. Employee ID, 84739. Department, Human Resources. Years of service, 23. Severance, 2 weeks. 2 weeks. After 23 years. David made a sound like he'd been punched. He gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles white. "There's more," I said quietly. I pulled up another email. This one was between Richardson and his CFO. "Ensure terminations are staggered to avoid legal action. Target older employees and those with health issues first. Cheaper to settle discrimination suits than pay benefits." David read it, then read it again, then looked at me with something that might have been rage or might have been grief. Probably both. "He knew," David said. "He specifically targeted people like my sister. Older, sick, vulnerable. Yes, that's illegal. Yes. And you're going to expose this?" "I'm going to try." He stood there, and I watched him make the choice that would define him. I watched him decide what kind of man he was going to be. Finally, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone. For a second, I thought he was calling the police, and I prepared myself for handcuffs and humiliation and prison. But he didn't call anyone. He started taking pictures. The same documents I'd photographed. The termination list. The discriminatory emails. All of it. "I'll give you 30 minutes, he said. "Then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to find this office empty, and I'm going to see that nothing was disturbed. Understand?" I understood. He was giving me cover, giving us both deniability. "Why?" I asked. He looked at me, and his eyes were wet. "Because Teresa raised me to be better than this, better than men like Richardson. And because if I don't help you, I'll have to look at her across the Thanksgiving table in 3 weeks and know I could have saved her and chose not to." He walked to the door, then turned back. "Marcus, don't make me regret this. I won't." He left, and I went back to work, photographing everything that would burn Richardson's empire to the ground. I spent Thursday afternoon in my apartment, uploading files to a Proton Mail account I'd created using the public library's Wi-Fi. I wasn't tech-savvy, but I knew enough to know Richardson had resources. If this got traced back to me before I was ready, I was finished. The plan was simple in concept, dangerous in execution. I would send the files to 3 journalists simultaneously, one at the local paper, one at a national business magazine, one at an investigative news outlet that had broken major corporate scandals before. I'd send it anonymously, with enough information to verify, but not enough to identify me immediately. By the time they traced it back, if they did, the story would already be out there. You can't unring a bell. My hands shook as I typed the email. Not from fear this time, from rage. I'd spent all afternoon reading through the files, diving deeper into Richardson's plan, and it was worse than I'd imagined. He wasn't just firing people, he was systematically destroying lives. The severance packages were deliberately calculated to be inadequate, just enough to avoid immediate lawsuits, not enough to survive on for more than a few weeks. He'd timed it for mid-November specifically, right before the holidays, knowing people would be desperate and more likely to sign away their rights to sue in exchange for a few extra $1,000. And the discrimination was blatant. A spreadsheet literally ranked employees by liability risk. Older workers, those with documented health issues, anyone who'd filed HR complaints, anyone in a protected class who might cost more in healthcare. It was eugenics dressed up in corporate language. I thought about my wife, Catherine. She died of cancer 8 years ago because we couldn't afford the treatment that might have saved her. Our insurance had covered the bare minimum, and the experimental therapy her doctors recommended cost more than our house. I'd watched her waste away, knowing there were options we couldn't reach, knowing some accountant somewhere had decided her life wasn't worth the expense. Richardson was doing the same thing, just at scale, deciding who deserved to survive and who was disposable. At 6:47 p.m. on Thursday, November 17th, I pressed send. 3 emails, 3 journalists, 200 pages of documents, 1 grenade thrown into the machine. Then I sat back and waited for the explosion. It came faster than I expected. By 9 p.m., my phone, the burner I'd bought that afternoon at Walmart, started buzzing. Unknown numbers. I didn't answer. I'd set up a voice message saying I'd only communicate through encrypted email, that I was risking everything, that they needed to verify the documents and publish fast. By 11 p.m., I got my first response. From the investigative outlet, documents verified, story going live at 6 a.m. Friday. You just saved a lot of people. Stay safe. I stared at those words until they blurred. You just saved a lot of people. Had I? Or had I just started a war I couldn't possibly win? I didn't sleep again that night. I sat by my window, watching the city lights, thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Richardson would know there was a leak. He'd launch an investigation, security footage, email logs, forensics. They'd eventually figure out it was me or David or both of us. I thought about calling Emma, leaving her a message, explaining why I'd done this, so if something happened to me, she'd understand I wasn't the coward she thought I was. But what would I say? Sorry, I was a terrible father, but I committed multiple felonies to save some people you've never met, so maybe you'll forgive me posthumously? Yeah, that'd go over great. At 5:30 a.m. Friday morning, my regular phone rang, the one people actually knew about. I looked at the screen. Raphael. Turn on the news, he said, his voice shaking. Holy shit, Marcus, turn on the news. I turned on my ancient TV. Every channel was running the same story. Richardson Industries scandal. Leaked documents reveal mass layoff plan targeting vulnerable workers. They had everything. The termination list, the discriminatory spreadsheets, Richardson's emails, his CFO's responses, all of it, laid out in brutal detail. The anchor's voice was appropriately outraged. The leaked documents suggest a calculated plan to terminate over 2,000 employees, with specific targeting of older workers and those with pre-existing health conditions.
Legal experts say this could constitute age and disability discrimination on a massive scale. My phone exploded with calls, texts. Everyone at the company must have seen it. I turned it off. At 7:15 a.m., I got an encrypted email from David. All terminations suspended pending investigation. Teresa is safe. You did it. Now disappear before they find you. I sat there, in my apartment that cost more than I could afford, wearing yesterday's clothes, looking at those words. You did it. I'd done it. 2,000 people would show up for work today and still have jobs. Sandra would keep her insurance 3 years from retirement. Jamal's daughter would grow up in that house. Teresa's kids would finish college. Emma would never know her father had been brave, just once. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some good deeds were meant to be anonymous. Except I knew the truth. Nothing stays secret forever. Richardson had armies of lawyers and investigators. He had money and power and rage. And he was coming for me.
Would you sacrifice your freedom, maybe your life, to save people you barely know? Marcus just did. But the war isn't over. It's just beginning. Comment below. Do you think he'll survive what comes next? Friday afternoon, I sat in a coffee shop 3 neighborhoods away from my apartment, nursing a coffee I couldn't taste, watching the news on my phone. Richardson Industries was in freefall, stock down 18%, board members calling emergency meetings, protesters already gathering outside the headquarters, and Richardson himself making a statement in front of a wall of cameras. These documents were obtained illegally. We are working with law enforcement to identify and prosecute the individual responsible for this theft. Make no mistake, this is corporate espionage, and we will pursue charges to the fullest extent of the law. His face was calm, too calm. That's how you knew he was furious. They were coming for me. I'd known it logically, but seeing him say it out loud made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. My burner phone buzzed. Another encrypted message from David. They're reviewing security footage, interviewing janitorial staff. You have maybe 48 hours before they narrow it down. You need to run, now. Run? To where? With what money? I had $847 in my checking account and about $40 in my wallet. I didn't have family to hide with, no friends outside this city, nowhere to go. But staying was suicide. I thought about the people I'd saved. Were they worth this? Was Sandra worth me becoming a fugitive? Was Jamal? Was Teresa? The answer should have been easy. Yes, of course, human lives trump my comfort. But the human brain doesn't work that cleanly. Fear is selfish, survival is selfish, and I was terrified. I left the coffee shop and walked, just walked, with no destination, trying to think through a fog of panic. The November cold bit through my jacket, my only jacket, threadbare at the elbows. Poor people don't have backup plans. We have what we have, and when it runs out, we're done. My phone rang, my regular phone, the one I'd turned back on because I was stupid and sentimental. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Marcus Webb? A woman's voice, professional, controlled. Who's asking? My name is Jennifer Zhao. I'm the journalist you sent the documents to, the one from the investigative outlet. I need to meet with you. Every alarm in my head went off. How did you get this number? I'm good at my job. Please, Marcus, I know you're scared. I know Richardson is hunting you, but I can help. I have resources, protection. We need to talk. No offense, but I don't trust anyone right now. Smart. But consider this. Richardson has a team of forensic analysts going through every piece of security footage from the past week. They're interviewing every employee who had access to that office. They're checking phone records, email logs, keycard swipes. By tomorrow night, they'll have your name. By Monday, there'll be a warrant. You need help, and I'm offering it. No offense, but I don't trust anyone right now. Smart. But consider this. Richardson has a team of forensic analysts going through every piece of security footage from the past week. They're interviewing every employee who had access to that office.
They're checking phone records, email logs, keycard swipes. By tomorrow night, they'll have your name. By Monday, there'll be a warrant. You need help, and I'm offering it. My throat was tight. Why would you help me?
Because you did something brave and stupid, and I don't want to see you end up in prison for it. And because I want the rest of the story. This isn't over, Marcus. The documents you leaked are damning, but Richardson's lawyers are already spinning it. They'll claim you doctored them, that you're a disgruntled employee, that this is revenge for some imagined slight. Your testimony, your story, could be what actually takes him down. She wasn't wrong. Leaked documents can be explained away. A witness is harder to discredit. If I meet you, I said slowly, how do I know you're not working with Richardson? How do I know this isn't a trap? You don't, but you also don't have better options. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to send you an address, a place I've used before for sources who need protection. You're going to meet me there in 2 hours. You're going to tell me everything. And then we're going to decide, together, how to keep you alive long enough to finish this. She hung up before I could respond. 10 seconds later, a text came through with an address in the warehouse district. Could be a trap. Probably was a trap. But she was right about one thing. I didn't have better options. I spent the next hour walking, thinking about my life, about the choices that had led me here. I thought about Catherine, and how, toward the end, when the pain was unbearable, she'd said, "Promise me you'll do something that matters. Promise me you won't just disappear." I'd promised. Then I'd spent 8 years disappearing anyway, one night shift at a time. Maybe this was me finally keeping that promise. Or maybe I was rationalizing my way into something that would get me killed. At 5:47 p.m., I stood outside the address Jennifer had sent. An old textile warehouse, mostly abandoned, the kind of place where drug deals and worse happened after dark. Real reassuring. I was about to turn around, about to decide this was too stupid even for me, when the side door opened. A woman stood there, Asian, mid-40s, wearing jeans and a coat, glasses, no makeup. She looked tired and real, and nothing like a setup. "Marcus Webb," she said, not a question. "Come inside. You're going to want to sit down for this." Why? Because I found something in those documents you sent, something you missed, and it changes everything. The inside of the warehouse was warmer than I expected. Jennifer had set up a space in the corner. Laptop, portable heater, folding chairs, coffee in a thermos. Professional, prepared. The kind of setup that said she'd done this before. "Sit," she said, pouring coffee into a paper cup and handing it to me. I wrapped my hands around it, grateful for the warmth, suspicious of the kindness. She sat across from me and opened her laptop. First, the good news. Richardson is in serious trouble. The Department of Labor opened an investigation this morning. The EEOC is getting involved. Multiple law firms are already filing class action suits. What you did worked, Marcus. Those jobs are safe. And the bad news? Richardson knows he's cornered. Cornered billionaires are dangerous. He's not going to just accept defeat. He's going to find who leaked those documents, and he's going to destroy them as an example. You have maybe 36 hours before they identify you. I'd already known that. You said you found something I missed. She turned the laptop toward me. You photographed a lot of documents. Most of them were about the layoffs. But there was one email thread you caught that wasn't directly related. Richardson and his CFO discussing something called Project Clearwater. Mean anything to you? I shook my head. It didn't mean anything to me either at first, but I'm a journalist. I dig. Project Clearwater is a shell company Richardson set up 6 months ago. On paper, it's a real estate investment firm. In reality, it's a money laundering operation. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. What? Richardson Industries has been bleeding money for 3 years. Bad investments, failed expansions, lawsuits. The company's on the verge of bankruptcy. The mass layoffs weren't just about cutting costs. They were about hiding the financial crisis from shareholders long enough for Richardson to move his personal wealth offshore through Project Clearwater. I stared at her, trying to process. So the 2,000 people were just cover? Collateral damage in a much bigger crime. He's been systematically draining the company's pension fund, funneling it through Clearwater and into offshore accounts. The layoffs were meant to create a narrative. Tough times, necessary cuts,
while he looted what was left and prepared to let the whole thing collapse. My hands started shaking again. The pension fund. Jesus Christ. That's not just jobs. That's people's retirements. Everything they've saved for decades. Exactly. And here's where it gets worse for you. If this goes public, Richardson doesn't just face discrimination charges. He faces federal fraud charges, maybe 20 years in prison, which means he has every incentive to make sure it doesn't go public. And the one person who can connect him to those documents, the one person who's seen inside his office, his computer, his secrets, is you. The heater hummed in the corner. Outside, I could hear traffic, distant sirens, the normal sounds of a city that had no idea what was happening in this warehouse. You're saying he'll kill me? Jennifer didn't blink. I'm saying he has the resources and the motivation. I'm saying men have died for less. And I'm saying you need protection that I can't provide alone. Then why am I here? Because I have a plan, but you're not going to like it. I almost laughed. Nothing about the last 48 hours had been likable. Try me. You go public. Full interview. Face, name, everything. You tell your story. How you overheard the plan, how you leaked the documents, why you did it. And then you tell them about Project Clearwater. You become too visible to quietly disappear. If something happens to you after that, everyone knows who did it. That's your plan? Make myself a target? You're already a target. This just makes you a target that Richardson can't afford to hit. She wasn't wrong, but every cell in my body was screaming to run, to hide, to disappear into some anonymous life in some anonymous city and hope they never found me. There's another reason, Jennifer said quietly. Those 2,000 workers, they still don't know the whole truth. They think they were saved by a whistleblower, but they don't know their pensions are gone. They don't know the company's about to collapse anyway. They don't know Richardson is stealing their futures even as we speak. You going public doesn't just protect you, it exposes everything. It gives them a chance to act, to file criminal charges, to freeze his assets before he can disappear them. I thought about Sandra, about Jamal, about Teresa and David, and everyone else who trusted that if they worked hard and played by the rules, the system would protect them.
If I do this, I said, if I go on camera and tell everything, my life is over. You understand that? I'll never work again, never be anonymous again. Emma will see it. Everyone I've ever known will know what I did. Yes, Richardson will come after me legally, criminally, every way he can. Yes, I could end up in prison anyway. Corporate espionage is real. Just because my motives were good doesn't mean I didn't break the law. That's possible. I stood up, paced to the window, looked out at the darkening city. Somewhere out there, Sandra was probably making dinner for her grandchildren. Jamal was probably giving his daughter a bath. Teresa was probably helping her kids with homework. Living their lives, saved but not safe, protected but not for long. And Emma was somewhere out there too, living a life without me in it, thinking I was a coward who chose wrong. When? I asked, my back still to Jennifer. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., national broadcast. I've already arranged it with the network. They're eager. This is the biggest story of the year, but they need your confirmation. I turned around, looked at this woman who'd tracked me down, who was offering me a lifeboat that might also be an anchor. Why are you doing this? Really? She was quiet for a moment. Because 15 years ago, I was a junior reporter at a small paper. I got a tip about a factory that was dumping chemicals into the water supply, making people sick, kids mostly. I was scared. The factory owner had lawyers, money, connections. I almost didn't publish, but I did. And you know what happened? What? He came after me, sued me, tried to get me fired, made my life hell for 2 years. But the factory got shut down. The families got compensation. The kids got treatment. And I learned that some stories are worth the cost. She stood up, walked over to me. This is one of those stories, Marcus. This is David versus Goliath,
And you're holding the stone. I know you're scared, but you're also brave. You've already proven that. Now you just have to be brave one more time. I thought about Catherine's promise, about Emma's accusation, about 17 years of being invisible, and whether it was too late to be seen. Okay, I said. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. I'll do it. Jennifer smiled, and for the first time since Wednesday night, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely alone in this. Good. Now let's prepare. Because once you go on that camera, there's no going back. You need to be ready for what comes next. What came next, I would learn, was worse than anything I'd imagined. But right then, in that warehouse, with coffee going cold and a journalist who believed my story, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I mattered. Saturday morning arrived too fast. I'd spent the night in a hotel room Jennifer paid for. Nothing fancy, just a place off the highway where the clerk didn't ask questions and the walls were thin enough to hear strangers' lives bleeding through. I didn't sleep, just sat on the edge of the bed, rehearsing what I'd say, imagining Emma watching, wondering if this would make her proud or just embarrass her further. Probably the latter. My estranged father is a criminal wasn't exactly a conversation starter. At 6 a.m., Jennifer picked me up. We drove to the studio in silence. I watched the city wake up. People heading to work, coffee shops opening, everyone living normal Saturday mornings while I was about to detonate my life on national television. The studio was smaller than I expected. Bright lights, cameras, a woman in too much makeup directing assistants. And there, sitting across from where I'd sit, was Marcus Chen. No relation to David or Teresa, Jennifer had assured me, one of the most recognized investigative journalists in the country. Mr. Webb, he said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, his eyes were kind but calculating. Thank you for doing this. What you're about to do takes courage. Or stupidity, I said. Often the same thing. They mic'd me up, put powder on my face to reduce shine, told me to look at Marcus, not the cameras, and to speak naturally, as if anything about this was natural. At 7:58 a.m., Marcus gave me a final nod. Remember, you're not just telling your story. You're giving voice to every person who's ever felt invisible, every worker who's been chewed up by people like Richardson. You matter, Marcus. Your story matters. Then the red light went on, and we were live. Good morning. I'm Marcus Chen, and this morning we have an exclusive interview with the whistleblower behind the Richardson Industries scandal. Marcus Webb, a janitor at the company for 17 years, is the man who leaked the documents exposing a plan to terminate over 2,000 employees in a discriminatory manner. But as we'll learn today, that's just the beginning of the story. Mr. Webb, thank you for being here. My mouth was dry, my hands were sweating, but I looked at Marcus Chen and I thought about Sandra and Jamal and Teresa, and I started talking. Thank you for having me. I'm not comfortable doing this. I'm terrified, actually, but some things are more important than comfort. Tell us what happened. Start from the beginning. And I did. I told them about Wednesday night, about the broken cartwheel and the overheard conversation, about Richardson's cruelty, his laughter, his complete disregard for the lives he was about to destroy. I told them about the people I knew, Sandra, Jamal, Teresa, making them real for the viewers, giving faces to the numbers. Then I told them about the laptop, about the choice I made, about David Chen finding me and deciding to look the other way. Marcus Chen leaned forward. You committed a crime. You accessed confidential information without authorization. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. Maybe not the legal thing, but the right thing. I've spent 17 years invisible, watching powerful people make decisions that destroy regular people's lives. And for 17 years, I kept my head down. I survived. But survival isn't enough. Not anymore. You mentioned there's more to this story than the layoffs. This was it. The moment. Once I said this out loud, Richardson would know I had everything. He'd know I was the real threat. I took a breath. James Richardson isn't just firing people to cut costs. He's been systematically looting Richardson Industries for at least 6 months, probably longer. He created a shell company called Project Clearwater and used it to funnel money out of the company's pension fund into offshore accounts. The mass layoffs were meant to hide the financial crisis while he moved his personal wealth beyond reach. He's not just destroying jobs, he's stealing retirements, life savings, futures. The studio was dead silent, except for the cameras whirring. Marcus Chen's face was grave. Those are serious accusations. Do you have proof? I have emails, spreadsheets, transfer records. I documented everything. And I've turned it all over to federal investigators as of last night. That last part was new information. Jennifer had arranged it after our warehouse meeting. But now it was public. Now everyone knew. Mr. Webb, Richardson Industries has released a statement calling you a disgruntled employee, a liar, someone with an axe to grind. How do you respond? I looked directly at the camera then, broke the rule about not looking at the lens. Because I wasn't talking to Marcus Chen anymore. I was talking to Richardson. I'm not disgruntled. I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted that people like you think you can buy your way out of consequences. That you can destroy thousands of lives and sleep soundly in your mansion. That you can look at human beings and see only line items on a balance sheet. You're not special, Mr. Richardson. You're not smarter than everyone else. You're just willing to be crueler. And that ends now. My voice cracked on the last words. Not from fear, from rage. From 17 years of swallowed anger finally finding its way out. I know you're watching this, I continued. I know you're already planning how to destroy me. But here's the thing, I'm already destroyed. You can't take anything from me I haven't already lost. My wife is dead. My daughter won't speak to me. I have $800 and a janitor's uniform. You can sue me, arrest me, do whatever you want, but you can't make me disappear. Not anymore. Everyone knows my name now. Everyone knows what you did. And if something happens to me, they'll know who did it. Marcus Chen let the silence sit for a moment. Professional, letting the emotion breathe. What do you want people watching this to understand? I turned back to him. That we're all one decision away from disaster, one layoff, one medical crisis, one bad investment. And when that happens, there's nobody coming to save you. The system isn't designed to catch you when you fall. It's designed to extract every last bit of value before you hit the ground. So we have to save each other. That's all we have. Each other. The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Details about the documents, timeline of events. Marcus Chen asked hard questions about breaking the law, about my motives, about whether I'd do it again. In a heartbeat, I said, without hesitation. When we finally finished, when the cameras stopped rolling, I felt hollow, empty, like I'd poured everything out and had nothing left. Jennifer met me in the hallway. You did great, powerful, authentic. This is going to explode.
Good, I said, though I wasn't sure I meant it. My phone, still off, had been charging in Jennifer's car. She handed it to me. You might want to leave this off for a while. It's gonna be chaos. But I couldn't help myself. I turned it on. 147 missed calls, 300 plus texts, emails flooding in faster than I could count, and one voicemail left at 8:23 a.m. while I was still on camera, from Emma. Dad, I'm watching. I'm watching you and call me. Please, just call me. Her voice was shaking, but she'd said Dad. She'd called me Dad. I started crying in that hallway, in front of Jennifer and the crew and everyone, and I didn't care. Maybe redemption was possible after all. Maybe it wasn't too late. Or maybe I was just a fool who'd gotten one small piece of grace before everything fell apart.
The interview went viral within an hour. By noon, it had 20 million views. By evening, 50 million. Hashtags trending, hashtag Marcus Webb, hashtag Richardson Scandal, invisible no more. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in from across the country. Workers who'd been fired unfairly, families who'd lost everything to corporate greed, people who saw themselves in my story. They called me a hero. They called me brave. They called me stupid, too, and dangerous, and a criminal, but mostly they called me human. Richardson Industries stock went into free fall. Trading was suspended. The board called an emergency meeting and within hours released a statement. James Richardson was being removed as CEO pending investigation. They were cooperating with federal authorities. They were so sorry. Empty words from people covering their asses. But the machinery of justice was moving, and that was something. I spent Saturday afternoon in Jennifer's hotel room. She'd insisted I stay there, said my apartment wasn't safe. Watching the news coverage and trying to process that I'd actually done it. I'd gone to war with a billionaire and won. Except it didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing in the ruins of something, unsure what to do with the rubble. At 4 p.m., I finally called Emma. My hands shook as I dialed. The phone rang once, twice, then, Dad. That word. After 7 years of silence, that word. Emma, I watched the whole thing, twice. I can't believe. I can believe it, but I can't believe you. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have answered if I'd called? Silence. Painful silence. Probably not, she admitted. But Dad, what you did, Jesus, you could go to prison. You could have been killed. I know. Then why? Because your mother made me promise to do something that mattered, and because I was tired of being a coward. I heard her breath catch. You were never a coward. You were just broken. We both were. After Mom died, I blamed you for everything, and that wasn't fair. I was 18 and angry, and I needed someone to hate, and you were there. I deserve the blame, Emma. I chose work over presence. I chose survival over connection. I wasn't there when it mattered. But you're there now, for those people, for strangers. You risked everything for them. I should have risked everything for you. She was crying now. I could hear it. Maybe you can now. Maybe it's not too late. If you don't end up in prison. Yeah, that's a big if. We talked for an hour. Really talked, for the first time since Catherine's funeral. She told me about her life. She was a social worker now, helping families in crisis, carrying on her mother's legacy of caring for broken things. She was engaged. She had a whole life I knew nothing about. And she wanted me to meet him, her fiancé. She wanted me to be part of her life again. I don't know if I'll be around, I said honestly. Richardson has lawyers. The FBI is investigating me too, not just him. I broke laws, Emma, real ones. Then we'll figure it out, together, like a family. Family. I'd forgotten what that word felt like. After we hung up, I sat in the dark hotel room and let myself feel something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Fragile, tentative hope that maybe I could have a life beyond this moment. That maybe destruction and redemption could coexist. Then, at 11:47 p.m., my burner phone rang. The one only Jennifer and David knew about. Unknown number. I answered. Marcus Webb. The voice was smooth, educated, cold. Not Richardson, someone who worked for him. You've made a grave mistake. My blood went cold. Who is this? Someone Mr. Richardson sent to deliver a message. You think you've won? You think going public protects you? You're wrong. We have resources you can't imagine, and we're patient. Maybe not today, maybe not this month, but eventually the spotlight moves, the story fades, and when everyone stops watching, we'll still be here, waiting. The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, realizing with crystal clarity what I'd actually done. I hadn't slain the dragon. I'd just pissed it off. Sunday morning brought worse news. Jennifer called at 6 a.m., her voice tight with controlled panic. "Marcus, you need to see this. Richardson's lawyers filed a lawsuit. Criminal charges for corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, computer fraud, unauthorized access. They're seeking maximum penalties. 20 years.
20 years. I'd be 72 when I got out. If I lived that long. There's more. David Chen was arrested an hour ago. They're charging him as an accomplice, claiming he helped you, that he violated his security clearance, that he's complicit in the theft. No. God, no. David had a family, a wife, a baby on the way. Teresa would never forgive me. I destroyed him, I said, my voice hollow. You didn't. Richardson did. But yes, there's collateral damage. There always is in wars like this. I thought about the warehouse, about Jennifer saying some stories are worth the cost. But I'd been thinking about my cost, not David's, not the cost to everyone around me. Jennifer, maybe I should turn myself in, plead guilty, make a deal, get David out of this. Don't. The moment you plead guilty, everything you exposed becomes fruit of the poison tree. Richardson's lawyers will use your confession to discredit all the evidence. Project Clearwater disappears. The pension theft disappears. He walks free, and you and David both go to prison for nothing. So what do? You fight. Federal investigators have 48 hours to file their own charges against Richardson based on the evidence you provided. If they do, and if the charges stick, then what you did becomes whistleblowing under federal protection. Your actions become legal. David gets exonerated. But if the feds don't act fast enough, or if Richardson's lawyers manage to suppress the evidence, then you're just a criminal, and he's a victim. 48 hours. Again. Everything in my life seemed to come down to impossible deadlines. Can you get me updates about David, about the investigation? I'll try. But Marcus, you need to prepare for the possibility that this doesn't end the way you hoped. That you did everything right and still lose. That's how it goes sometimes. After she hung up, I sat on the hotel bed and thought about Catherine. About how, at the end, she'd accepted that fair wasn't a thing that existed. That sometimes good people suffer and bad people win, and all you can do is choose who you want to be in the space between. I'd chosen. For better or worse, I'd chosen to be someone who fought instead of someone who hid. Now, I'd find out what that choice cost. Outside, Sunday morning sun was rising over a city that knew my name now, for better or worse. Sandra and Jamal and Teresa were probably reading about me, about David, wondering if they'd been saved or if I'd just made everything worse. And somewhere, James Richardson was in his mansion, sipping coffee, planning his next move in a game he'd been playing his whole life, while I was just learning the rules. The war wasn't over. It had barely begun. But at least I wasn't invisible anymore. Monday morning, I woke up in the hotel room and didn't recognize myself in the mirror. Not because I looked different, same gray stubble, same tired eyes, same janitor's hands, but because I felt different, present, visible, real. The news was running non-stop coverage. Legal analysts debating whether I'd committed crimes or performed a public service. Ethicists arguing about the morality of breaking laws to expose greater wrongs. Everyone had an opinion about Marcus Webb, the janitor who took on a billionaire. At 10:23 a.m., Jennifer called. The feds just filed charges against Richardson. Fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, RICO violations, 11 counts. They're freezing his assets, including the offshore accounts. They've got him, Marcus. They've actually got him. I should have felt triumph, should have felt vindication. Instead, I just felt tired. What about David? Charges dropped an hour ago. He's being released. Classified as a protected witness now, not an accomplice. It's over for him. Thank God. Thank God for that at least. And me? Jennifer was quiet for a moment. The Justice Department is reviewing your case. Richardson's lawyers are still pushing for prosecution, but there's precedent for whistleblower protection. It's complicated.
But Marcus, you have public support. You have the evidence on your side. And you have prosecutors who know that charging you would send a message that doing the right thing gets you punished. So maybe I don't go to prison? Maybe you don't go to prison. I sat with that. The possibility of a future, of Emma's wedding, of being a grandfather someday, of living a life beyond this moment. What happens to the workers? I asked. The 2,000 people? Richardson Industries is being restructured. New management. Independent audit of all finances. The pension fund is being restored. They found most of the money before Richardson could move it. Jobs are secure for now. You saved them, Marcus. Really saved them. Sandra would retire with her benefits. Jamal's daughter would grow up in that house. Teresa's kids would finish college. They'd never know how close they came to losing everything. They'd never know my name, most of them. And that was okay. That afternoon, I met David in a park downtown. He looked exhausted, drained, older than 34. "I'm sorry," I said immediately. "I'm so sorry I dragged you into this." He shook his head. "You didn't drag me. I made a choice. Same as you." He paused. "Teresa wants to meet you. She knows what you did, what we both did. She wants to say thank you." "I don't need thanks." "Yeah, but she needs to give it. Let her." So that evening, I met Teresa Chen in the same coffee shop where I'd been hiding just days before. She hugged me, actually hugged me, and started crying. 23 years, she said. 23 years I gave that company, and they were going to throw me away like trash. You saved my life. You saved all of us. I just did what anyone should have done. But nobody else did, just you. The invisible janitor nobody noticed. You saw us when nobody else bothered to look. We talked for an hour. She told me about her kids, about their dreams, about how close she'd come to having to tell them to drop out of school, about the bottle of sleeping pills she'd bought, just in case. She couldn't handle the shame of failure. But I didn't need them, she said, because of you. When I left that coffee shop, I understood something I hadn't before. Heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. It's about recognizing that your comfort is less important than someone else's survival. Tuesday afternoon, I got the call from the Justice Department. No charges. Full whistleblower protection. They were citing public interest and the precedent of prior cases. I was free. I called Emma immediately. She screamed with joy. "Dad! Oh my God, Dad! You're not going to prison! You're not going to prison!" Apparently not. "So you can come to dinner this weekend, meet James, meet my life." I'd like that. "And Dad, I'm proud of you. I know I didn't say it clearly before, but I'm so proud. Mom would be too." After we hung up, I sat in that hotel room. Jennifer had extended my stay through the week, and I cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming weight of having survived something I didn't think I'd survive. Wednesday morning, I went back to Richardson Industries. Not as an employee, I'd been terminated, unsurprisingly, but as a visitor. I wanted to see the building one last time, to say goodbye to the ghosts. The lobby was different. New security guards, new protocols. Photos of the old executive team had been replaced with motivational posters about integrity and transparency. Corporate whitewashing of sin, but at least the sin had been acknowledged. I took the elevator to the executive floor, walked the hallway I'd pressed myself against that Wednesday night, stopped outside Richardson's office, now being used by the interim CEO, someone brought in to clean up the mess. I didn't go in, just stood there, remembering the terror, the anger, the moment I decided to stop being invisible. "Can I help you?" A young woman in a blazer approached, polite but firm. "No," I said, "just paying respects to a ghost." "I'm sorry?" "Nothing. Have a good day." I left the building and walked out into November sunshine, the air cold but clean, the city moving around me with its usual indifference. Nobody recognized me on the street. My 15 minutes were already fading. The news cycle moving on to the next crisis, the next scandal, the next story. And that was fine. I didn't need to be famous. I just needed to matter, once, when it counted. That night, I sat in my apartment, my actual apartment, the studio with the broken heating and the thin walls, and I wrote a letter to Catherine. I'd never done that before, never been one for sentimentality, but I needed her to know. Dear Catherine, I kept my promise. I did something that mattered. It cost me almost everything, but I'd do it again. I'm meeting Emma for dinner this weekend. We're going to try to be a family again. I don't know if I deserve that chance, but I'm going to take it. The world didn't change. Richardson will probably avoid prison somehow. Powerful people always do. But 2,000 families get to keep their futures. That's not nothing. I'm not invisible anymore. For better or worse, I exist. I'm here. I was here. I love you. I'm sorry I failed you, but I'm trying not to fail anymore. Marcus.
I didn't send it anywhere. Just folded it up and put it in the drawer next to the photo from Emma's graduation. Some letters aren't meant to be read. They're just meant to be written. 30 days later, I was working as a security consultant, ironic, I know, for a labor rights organization, teaching workers how to recognize wage theft, how to document violations, how to protect themselves from companies that saw them as disposable. Jennifer had connected me with them, said my story gave me credibility they couldn't buy. The pay was terrible, but it was enough, and the work mattered. Emma and I had dinner every Sunday. I'd met James, good guy, social worker like her, clearly adored her. They'd set a wedding date, June. They wanted me to walk her down the aisle. I'd cried when she asked. David and Teresa and I met once a month for coffee. We didn't talk about what happened, mostly. Just lived our lives, grateful to have lives to live. Richardson was awaiting trial. His lawyers were good, but the evidence was overwhelming. He'd probably get a few years, serve less, come out still wealthy, still powerful. The system protects people like him. But he'd lost his empire, his reputation, his illusion of invincibility. And I'd gained something I thought I'd lost forever, a reason to wake up in the morning. 1 year later, June arrived with sunshine and hope. I stood in a small church, wearing a suit Emma had bought me, my first suit in 20 years, waiting for the music to start. She appeared at the end of the aisle in her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit, and my heart shattered and reassembled simultaneously. "Ready, Dad?" she whispered, taking my arm. "Ready." We walked together, father and daughter, broken and healing and alive. The ceremony was beautiful. The reception was loud. My speech was terrible. I cried through most of it, but people applauded anyway. Late that night, after everyone had left, Emma found me sitting outside, looking at stars. "You okay?" she asked, sitting beside me. "Yeah, just thinking about your mother, wishing she could see this." "She can. I believe that." "Maybe." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Emma said, "You know what I realized today? You spent 17 years invisible because you thought that's what you deserved. But you were wrong. You always mattered. You just had to believe it yourself. When did you get so wise?" "Mom. Definitely Mom." I laughed. She was right. Later, driving home alone, I passed Richardson Industries. The building was still there, restructured and renamed, but standing. Lives had been saved in that building, families preserved, futures protected. Because one invisible man decided to be seen. Because sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one that changes everything. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's being terrified and showing up anyway. I parked outside my apartment. Still the same studio, still too expensive, still home. Inside, I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the city breathe. Somewhere out there, Sandra was with her grandchildren. Jamal was teaching his daughter to ride a bike. Teresa was celebrating another kid's graduation. And I was here, visible, present, alive. Not a hero,
Just a man who'd done one brave thing when it mattered most. That was enough. If this story moved you, if Marcus's journey meant something to you, I need you to do 3 things. Hit that like button. Let me know this story matters. Subscribe to this channel. There are more stories like this. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about courage in the face of impossible odds, about the power of standing up when everyone else sits down. And comment below. Tell me about a time you had to choose between staying safe and doing what's right. Tell me about the moment you decided to be visible. Tell your story, because every story matters, and every voice deserves to be heard. Marcus Webb was invisible for 17 years. Then he wasn't. That changed everything. What will you change?